I have a great pleasure to introduce Jurgen Maier, who is Siemens CEO for the UK. And you may recognize him. He's been on Question Time a few times. He's been on the TB program. He's probably one of the few businessmen who have actually put their heads above the parapet on Brexit. And arguing against a no deal scenario. Anyway, I'd like to welcome him here to talk about, I think, something beyond Brexit. Okay, so we're not going to get bogged down too much in Brexit, but I know you want to talk about the
good.
an industrial strategy, the way forward for the UK economy.
Yeah, and and the reason why is actually because of the discussion that we've just been listening to on the stage. I do think Brexit has just become far too much the focus of all of our political conversations, and it's not going to unite the nation. The thing that can unite the nation is, what are we going to do on this really important agenda of climate change, of zero net carbon? So I do think the announcement yesterday is tremendous, and I do hope that whoever becomes our next Prime Minister does something quite amazing and actually says, I'm not going to poo-poo that because it came from somebody previous, and I'm going to run with this, and I'm going to make this a real opportunity for Britain, and really something that creates a much stronger purpose that people can run behind, rather than Brexit being the thing that we're running behind. So I do think this thing of what is our purpose, which is how do we create a sustainable Britain, how do we create a new industrial revolution, we need to put much stronger out there. Okay, so
what's your top advice? What should be right on the top of the in tray of the new Prime Minister?
Well, it is actually those two things. You know, I mean, if you're looking as an investor in this country, or an inward investor like my company is, the things we look out for are, what are the investment appetites for really creating a sustainable Great Britain, and what is our appetite for really supporting the industry of the future. The good news is that Britain is doing some great things in this space, but we can never quite be sure whether this is sustainable, whether this is long-term, whether it will survive the next Prime Minister, the next government, etc. I mean, if you take offshore wind as an example, that's a good example of where in Britain there has been quite a long-term support for offshore wind as one of our core sources of energy to provide sustainable energy, and that did encourage Siemens to invest in the UK, create a factory in Hull, create 1,000 jobs, but much more important than that is then all of the supply chain that starts to come in and starts to create prosperity and jobs around that. But it's only done on the back of sustainable future in that energy. If you take another industry, if you take the railway industry, for example, we're not quite as forward-looking. We're sort of, we're doing phase 1 of high speed 2. We're upgrading all sorts. But is there really the integrated strategy that says to investors up and down the country, this is a market that I can really invest in locally? We've taken a punt and we've said we're going to invest in a next new factory here in the UK. But is the investment appetite, is it really there for other companies to crowd in on the back of high speed 2 might happen, might not happen, Northern Powerhouse Rail might happen, might not happen. So it's that long-term, sustainable, strategic outlook for some of these key industries.
And do you think the net carbon target that we've heard, is that going to be enough to build some confidence?
No. It will definitely have increased confidence. which is good. Will it have done enough to now suddenly unlock a whole lot of investment in the low carbon technology sector? I would suspect not. And the reason for that is of course, it's been an announcement. I think we're all going, great, brilliant, let's get behind it. But obviously, the business and the investor community will now be sitting and going, is this really now going to become the strategy of the next Prime Minister, of the next government? Is there going to be things behind this, initiatives behind this, which really, really sustain this for the long term? I hope it does. I think it's a brilliant announcement, but just one quick announcement like that yesterday, I don't think it's going to change the needle massively yet.
What would you like to be able to report back to your Siemens HQ about how there's follow through on this?
Well, that on the back of it, we develop a very strategic industrial strategy, which is not just about how we create this net zero carbon Britain, but how do we get behind and invest in the innovations that are going to help create that sustainable Britain, and thereby to help encourage us as a company, but with lots of other companies, to join in research, in innovation programs that are about the next generation of energy storage, just to name a few examples, that technologies which are going to help us create more sustainable cities, etc., etc. So we want to see really long-term sustainable, with money going into R&D and innovation, that we can join in and we can create more value in this space here in the UK.
Why do you think that so few companies have actually been vocal about Brexit?
About Brexit?
About Brexit, about warning about...
Well, I think when the whole journey started, I think there was quite a lot of companies out there and were vocal about it. I think, as the journey has gone on, I think there's probably two things that has happened. And one is that, for many companies like Siemens, it's exactly what I've just been saying. The purpose for us investing and being here in Great Britain is not about the solution we find to Brexit. Yes, we need to find one, and it's important, and preferably it's not no deal. But more important to us is the purpose of how are we creating an industrial strategy? How can we invest here to help create a fourth industrial revolution? How can we invest here to create a sustainable future? That's what really drives us. That's our purpose. And we feel, that Brexit has taken the oxygen out of all of those other very important conversations. So I think that's why people just, they just don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about these much more important things.
So, second referendum, you don't support that?
Look, I was always somebody that said, because of what I've just said, I would rather get on, find a deal, create some certainty through that, and therefore, as quickly as possible, allow us to move on to these more important agendas. So that's why I felt the best scenario is not another referendum, because it is likely to split the nation further. The argument goes on and on and on, and it doesn't really resolve the issue. Now, look, we are 3 years on now, and we have not been able to find a deal. I think the new Prime Minister has got a chance to try and do that. I am coming round to the thought that, if a decision isn't found soon, there may need to be another democratic process, whether that's a referendum or a general election or whatever. It's not my preference. I would rather have a deal, but in the end, it may need to be decided in that way.
Were there any Slido questions that come up on screen? Yes. Okay. Is investment in the UK now seen as a punt from international investors? Is it a risk?
I mean, there's always a risk in any investment. And when we made our investment in Hull, in the offshore wind turbine facility, the investment we're now making in rail, you're always taking some risk. You know, I don't think it would be responsible to call it a punt, and that is why you know, we do want to work, and we are working with government to make sure that around all of these areas that I'm describing, whether it's offshore, whether it's new industrial revolution, smart cities, that it is more than a punt, that there is a sustainable commitment behind this and a sustainable partnership. You know, industrial strategies are definitely not about government pointing to the new areas, the new technology areas. It's about the private sector working with the public sector, working out what these technology areas are and jointly committing to invest in them. So, yeah, that's what we do. We don't take punts, we take risks, and we like to do it in collaboration with the government.
A question of whether that, you know, what UK companies and the UK government can learn from the German experience on industrial strategy.
Well, I think in a nutshell, it is that long-termism, and it is accepting that the state has a role to play in identifying and jointly investing in some of the future technology trends of the future. You know, Germany, as an example, has done that for decades and done it in a very sustainable way. In the UK, we have had, you know, a good 4 decades where, you know, actually, I mean, we said we were largely driving a free market economy, and that's what sort of drove our economists, it sort of drove our policy making. But actually, we were prioritizing and making decisions on certain areas that we would invest in. You know, I mean, we have just made this huge investment about net zero carbon. But then what we didn't do is follow through to say, if these are our goals, what are we going to do to intervene or support with public money in a very smart and intelligent way to make sure we maximize the local value out of those opportunities. So again, if I take offshore wind as the example, 10 years ago, what we would have done, and by the way, that's what we started doing as a country, we said we're going to do offshore wind, we're going to invest in it, billions of pounds, and then we're going to let the economy sort out what happens. And whenever we've done that in the past, actually we end up becoming largely an importing nation of the technologies that drive that new revolution. We have got this one slightly better than we have before because an industrial strategy did emerge. We have worked in partnership with government. Government have put money into innovation and R&D and new technology areas, and we are starting to create new local value, local companies that can supply, create jobs in that new sector, and of course, ultimately become a beacon of the world and export that technology. So in the end, each one of these technology areas, and the same can go for battery storage, energy storage systems, the same goes for the new revolution of electric vehicles, etc. It's to see it not just as we need to do this to create these new economies and to decarbonize, it's what do we do to create new industries, new jobs, an exporting nation, and create real value and real leadership out of these.
How important would you say, well, carbon capture and storage and hydrogen were 2 of the technologies that were highlighted this morning. How important are they, do you think, in terms of
They're both important. So, you know, I think in this whole area of low carbon technologies and energy storage, you know, there are lots of opportunities for lots of innovations to mature and commercialize into the marketplace. But certainly hydrogen is going to be part of the mix, that is for sure. And on energy storage schemes, I think, you know, gas storage type, so what we call power to X, so it's creating hydrogen or ammonia and then running that through turbines to create low carbon energy. All of these are going to have a role to play in the low carbon economy.
And on the demand side, Mike Thompson from the Climate Change Committee was talking about how our appliances are going to change, how the energy demand in the home is going to have to change. Presumably Siemens would would be involved there.
No, absolutely. I mean, the place where we're doing a lot of work is in the sort of the local grid management of all of that. So it's the so-called decentralized energy schemes. How do you allow homes to become not just consumers of energy, but also creators of energy? You know, how can they sell into the grid, take from the grid? How can you use your battery storage system in your house, or it could be your EV in your house? How can you create a smart demand and supply side grid system out of that? Those are the sorts of areas that we're involved in. Battery storage systems for domestic use, we think is an opportunity. So, I mean, actually, it's mind-boggling when you think that when you put that vision and that purpose out there of we are going to be a net carbon neutral nation by 2050, you know, if we really drive a sustainable industrial strategy behind that, the mind boggles in terms of the opportunities you can create for technology companies up and down the country to create wealth, jobs and prosperity.
That sounds like a great note to end on, and let's hope it happens and the government follows through.
So do I. Very nice speaking to you. Thank you.